Section 20 of Library Essays, Papers Related to the Work of Public Libraries. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Library Essays, Papers Related to the Work of Public Libraries by Arthur Elmore Bostwick. Malemployment in the Library. Students of the labor problem have given a vast amount of attention to the unemployed, but comparatively little to the malemployed. It troubles them, and very properly, that there should be large numbers of persons who are doing no work, who are contributing nothing toward the operation of the world's machinery. They do not seem to be so greatly bothered that there are persons hard at work to no purpose or with evil result, whose efforts either do not help the world along or actually impede it or hold it back. Serious as is the case of those who are not employed at all, it is nothing compared with those who are employed badly. One reason for this neglect, which is at the same time a reason why it should no longer exist, is that the burden of unemployment bears most conspicuously on the individual, while that of malemployment is predominantly civic. It is true that unemployment works civic injury, and that malemployment, especially if it be criminal, is recognized at once as a possible harm to the individual. But what I mean is that the unemployed person, unless he is one of the idle rich, is greatly concerned about his lack of employment, which touches his pocket directly. He does all that he can to get back into the ranks of the employed, but once there, it does not occur to him to ask whether what he is doing benefits society or is of no value to it or actually harms it. Even if he does so inquire, he is not likely to give up a job that pays him well simply because what he is doing is injurious to the world's progress. The injury done is social and civic, and we must look to increased social and civic consciousness for its abatement. I owe this word malemployment in its contrasted use with unemployment to William Kent, a member of Congress from the city of Chicago. In a recent interview, Mr. Kent gives it as his opinion that the sin of the day is waste, the expenditure of effort for naught or for positive ill. Of course, when we get down to details, there is difficulty or even impossibility in deciding whether or not a given man is malemployed. We may leave out of consideration here all persons engaged in criminal occupations. For instance, Mr. Kent considers that the small army of men engaged in the manufacture of champagne are all malemployed. Whether we agree with him or not depends somewhat on our predispositions and our points of view. Many parents, in earlier days, thought that when children were at play, they were malemployed. Most persons now regard this form of employment as necessary and beneficial, although Dr. Boris Sidis thinks that the same interest now employed in aimless play may be used to carry the child onward in the path of individual progress and development. How about the vast number of persons occupied in amusing or trying to amuse the public, employees of theaters, recreation parks, and so on? Many are well employed, some are doubtless malemployed. Among persons that we should all agree are malemployed are all those writing books or plays that are morally harmful, as well as those concerned in publishing such books or producing such plays, and, for the moment, all who are reading or witnessing them. Persons engaged in manufacturing or distributing useless or harmful products, all who do work of any kind so badly that inconvenience or harm results, unnecessary middlemen whose intervention in the process of distribution only impedes it and adds to its expense. Anyone may add to the list by taking thought a little. If all these mal-employed persons should suddenly lose their positions, the result would be beneficial to society, even if society had to support them in idleness. If they should all turn their attention from mal-employment to beneficial uses, how incalculably great a blessing they would bestow upon mankind. It is every man's business, it seems to me, to inquire whether he is well employed or mal employed, and if the occupation in which he is engaged is generally beneficial to society, then whether all those under his orders are well employed in carrying out its purpose. Let us, as librarians, take up this civic task for a few moments. And first, let us not hastily conclude that we are necessarily well employed simply because we are librarians. A library may do harm. I have personally known of harm done by libraries. A group can be no better than its constituents. A collection of harmful books is assuredly itself harmful. More, a chain is no stronger than its weakest link. A fleet is no faster than its slowest ship. And we may almost say that a library is no better than its worst book. And we must not forget that a book may be bad in 3 ways. It may give incorrect information, teach what is morally wrong, or use language that is unfitting. It may be necessary that a library should contain any or all of these, but if they give it its atmosphere and control its influence as an educational institution, even unwittingly, it is anti-social, and those who administer it are mal-employed. I have in mind a pseudo-scientific book for children that abounds in misstatements combined with beautiful illustrations. A book of travel full of ludicrous misinformation. A work intended to teach Italians English, whose English is screamingly funny. The library assistant who hands one of these to a reader is mal-employed. I can make a list, and so can you, of books that teach, directly or by implication, that what is universally acknowledged to be wrong is right, at least under certain circumstances, that theft is smart and that swindling is unobjectionable. The library assistant who circulates these is mal-employed. All of us can easily place our hands on books whose only fault is that their language is objectionable, incorrect, silly, or vulgar. They may be otherwise unobjectionable, yet I venture to say that the distribution of these books is also mal-employment. How about the librarian who administers such a library, and the staff who assist him? They are all mal-employed. No matter how well and how conscientiously the cataloger may perform her task, no matter how clean the janitor may keep the front steps, they are only aiding to keep up an institution that disseminates falsehood, teaches unrighteousness, encourages vulgarity, and they are all mal-employed. This is what I mean when I say that a library may be no better than its worst book. If its output is bad, all exertion to accomplish that output is also bad. And as for the output itself, it may be that the good done by 1,000 good books may not outweigh the ill done by a few bad ones. A person is always mal-employed when he is leaving a more important thing undone to do a less important one. The degree of mal-employment in this case is measured, of course, by the difference in value between the two things. Mr. E. L. Pearson, in one of his library articles in the Boston Transcript, calls attention to what he names sideshows in libraries, and asserts that the chief business of a library, the proper care and distribution of books, is often neglected that other things may be attended to, and that money needed for books is often diverted to these other uses. This is undoubtedly true in many cases, and insofar as it is true, some librarians and library assistants are mal-employed. The scope of library work has broadened out enormously of late, and libraries are doing all sorts of things that are subsidiary to their main work, things that will make that work easier and more effective. This is as it should be, provided that these numerous tails do not wag the dog. To take an extreme instance, we will assume that a small library is in great need of books, and that a small gift of money, instead of being expended for these, is put into material for picture bulletins. We should have no difficulty in concluding that the person who makes the bulletins is mal-employed. And in so doing, we should not be condemning picture bulletins at all, or saying that money spent for them is wasted. Take again a case specially noted by Mr. Pearson, which is bothering the heads of some of our library trustees at this moment: the acceptance and preservation of full sets of the printed catalogue cards of the Library of Congress. There can be no doubt of the value of such depository sets to certain libraries, and as they are given free of charge, the only expense connected with them is the cost of an assistant's time in filing them, amounting perhaps to an hour or two a day, and that of cabinets in which to keep them. Whether this cost is far outweighed by the usefulness of the collection to the library and its patrons, or whether that usefulness is practically nil, making the outlay wasteful, no matter how small it may be, must be answered by each library for itself. In some cases, labor expended on the filing of LC cards is undoubtedly mal-employment. Certain kinds of work which were either not mal-employment when they were adopted, or were not recognized as such, have become so by reason of a change, either in the conditions of the work itself, or in the way in which it is regarded by those who are doing it and by the public that benefits by it. Take, for instance, labor performed under an age-limit rule for children, such as nearly all libraries once possessed, and such as is still enforced in some places. If it is true that the library ought not to be used by children below a specific age, work done in ascertaining their ages and in excluding those barred out by the rule is necessary and valuable. If this is not true, if the exclusion of such children may be actually harmful to the community, it follows that all such work is the most flagrant kind of mal-employment. But there may also be mal-employment in the course of work of undoubted advantage to the library and its public. If in the course of such work something is done that sets it back instead of helping it on, or that injures the library in some other way more than it helps by what it directly affects, labor expended on that thing is mal-employment. This is a more fundamental and elementary thing than lack of efficiency. If an assistant is cataloging books well, but more slowly than she ought, she is not efficiently employed, but neither is she mal-employed, for she is doing nothing that directly injures the work. If she were to stop, the library would be injured, not benefited. But if she is making egregious blunders in her work, causing undue labor in revision, or making the catalogue confused or misleading in case her cards should get into it, it might be better for the library if she were to stop work, and she is surely mal-employed. The public is apt to generalize from inefficient data. The user who is treated rudely or sullenly at the desk just once does not say, "I will make a record of this and of my subsequent experiences, and see whether it is a usual thing or an abnormal one." Not at all. He or she at once reports in conversation that the public library assistants are continuously rude and disagreeable, and the machinery is forthwith sent in motion that makes or mars reputation. We may chafe at this, we may try to disregard it, but in the end we shall have to accept it as a fact of human nature. The public institution that wants to acquire that valuable asset, reputation, whether it is a reputation for kindliness, for helpfulness, for common sense, for scholarly acquirements, will have to make up its mind to be kind, helpful, sensible, and scholarly, not 50% or 75% of the time, but 100% of the time. But entirely apart from such serious intervals of mal-employment as this, is it not probable that all of us are mal-employed for some little part of our time? Is it not probable, in other words, that our work would be improved if we should omit certain parts of it and do nothing at all instead? It is certain, for one thing, that no one could work continuously day and night without serious or fatal mal-employment. That is the reason why our working hours are limited to 7 or 8 in the 24. Doubtless some workers are overworked and thus mal-employed in their hours of overwork. The sleepy railroad engineer, for instance, who misses a signal and sends 100 passengers to eternity. We are doubtless free in the library from just this kind of mal-employment, except so far as it is forced upon us by assistants who work or play too strenuously outside of working hours. To go back to the assistant who is cross or careless for an hour every day, it is quite possible that she is in no condition for working during that hour, and this is not because the library hours of work are too long, but because she does not take needed rest outside of those hours. Sometimes this cannot be helped. Often it is distinctly the worker's fault, and it is surely putting the library in a false position to make it overwork its staff to their detriment and its own, just because the assistant puts in her best and freshest hours in work, or more often in amusement outside the library. Let me pause here to say that the reason we take vacations is to avoid the chance of this kind of mal-employment. The theory of the vacation is widely misunderstood. Some take it to be a period of amusement granted for services rendered, "I think I have earned a vacation," they say. Others look upon it as playtime wrung from an unwilling employer. The more they can get off, the better they are. Few realize that it is, or ought to be, simply an incident in the year's work, an assignment to special duty, without which malemployment would be more apt to result. The malemployed intervals of an otherwise valuable worker are often due to ignorance of conditions or sheer inability to meet them. In an interesting study of bricklaying, one of the modern school of efficiency engineers found that most bricklayers kept their bricks too far from the point on the wall where they were to be laid, and that a long and wasteful carrying movement resulted. If the time occupied by this lost motion could have been eliminated and simply given to resting, even without doing any work, good would have resulted. These periods were hence intervals of malemployment. The engineer eliminated them easily and simply by bringing the pile of bricks within a few inches of the wall. It is easy to say, "Why, of course, anyone would think of that," only no one ever did think of it. A large proportion of the most valuable inventions and discoveries have been of this character. Someone has remarked that in the earliest stage of an invention, people say, "It won't work." Later they say, "It may work, but it won't be of any use." Finally, when it is usefully running, they say, "What of it? Everybody has always known about it." We don't do these obvious things because they are elements in a series of acts that have grown to be habitual. We take care of them subconsciously. Also, they take up so little time individually that at first thought it seems foolish to try to improve or eliminate them. Suppose one does a useless or even an injurious thing that lasts but 3 seconds. If he does it just once and then stops, it would doubtless be folly to change it. If, however, like the bricklayer's useless and tiresome motions, it is repeated hundreds and thousands of times, the matter stands on quite a different footing. It is probable that all of us are habitually doing certain things in ways that involve, without our realizing it, elements of this kind, either mechanical or mental. Many things that we are doing by laborious repetition, wearying ourselves and using up valuable material, might be made to do themselves if we only knew how to utilize tendencies and forces that are all about us, unsuspected. One of the forces, for instance, is the desire of every person to do that which will give him pleasure. If the things we want done can be done in accordance with that desire, we can get others to do them for us. The classic example of the boys who whitewashed Tom Sawyer's fence for him will occur to all. There is deep philosophy in this. I have known librarians to exhaust themselves by trying to get newspapers to publish what newspapers never would publish, while the reporters besiege others for items which they know will be just what they want. The rules of some libraries, both those for their public and those for their own assistants, all seem to run uphill, to rub everyone the wrong way, while those of others seem to get themselves obeyed without any trouble. Sometimes the substitution of a mechanical appliance for brain work is what we want. What, for instance, is the use of tiring one's brain and impairing its usefulness for other needed work by forcing it to perform such a mechanical operation as adding a column of figures? Every library that can afford to own an adding machine ought to have one. The ones that cannot afford it usually do not need it. While we are discussing the malemployment that does its harm by tiring out the worker physically or mentally and making him unfit for other work, we must not neglect to say a word about unnecessary talk. Nothing is so tiring to the brain as talk. I sometimes think that if we were all forced to do our work in silence, we would get along more rapidly, even if we had to communicate with each other in writing. If a man were in charge of a piece of complicated machinery, and if he feared that something had got into it to clog it, while his knowledge of its elementary parts was still so slight that he could not tell which particular bit in all the moving mass was helping it on and which was hindering it, what would he do? He could remove the pieces one by one and watch the effect. If the machine refused to run without a certain piece, he would conclude that it was an absolutely necessary part. If it still ran, though with difficulty, he would conclude that the part, though not necessary, still promoted efficient operation. If removal resulted in no change at all, the piece was evidently either an unnecessary part or an alien piece not so placed as to interfere with action. If the machine worked decidedly better after removal, the removed element must have been a clog, was, in fact, mal-employed. How many of us feel like submitting to this test? If you should stop your work, would the library machine run along quite as usual? Or would it limp? Or would it refuse to run at all? Or would it, oh distasteful thought, would it jump ahead and function with greater speed and smoothness? I believe in vacations, and yet I rather like to feel that the absence of an assistant on vacation makes a difference. And if everyone in her department looks forward with fond expectation to her return and greets her with a look of satisfaction and sighs of relief, I cannot help feeling that she is a more integral part of the library machinery than if her return were generally regarded with indifference or were dreaded as a sort of calamity. When everyone feels that she can work much better when Miss Blank is away, I am forced to inquire whether in truth Miss Blank is not a clog in the wheels instead of a cog, and whether a permanent vacation would not be the proper thing for her. And how about your library as a whole? Suppose it should be leveled by a tornado, or swallowed up by an earthquake, or swept away by a flood. What effect would this have on the life of your town? Would the passer-by point to the ruins, or to the hole in the ground where once your library stood, with the same kind and amount of interest that he would show when viewing the stump of an old tree or the fragments of a blasted boulder? Or would every man, woman, and child feel the loss? Would the teachers seek in vain for aid, the merchants for information, the workmen for data of use to them in their daily tasks? In other words, is your library of such definite use in the community that it would feel your loss as it would that of a schoolhouse, a church, the railroad station, the principal retail store? Or would its loss affect that community only like the destruction of the monument on the green or the fence around Deacon Jones' pasture? If we are to make the library a vital influence in the community, we must so conduct it that its loss would be felt as a calamity, that it could be spared no more than the post office could be spared, or the doctor, or the school. and we must do our best so to carry on every part of its work, every element that goes to make up its service to the public, that this part or element is contributing toward that service and not injuring it or delaying it. It is better for the community that we should be unemployed than malemployed, and if the community should ever find out that we are the latter, we may be assured that unemployment will shortly be our condition, whether we like it or not. End of section 20.